Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's panel, Marketing Sustainability in the Stakeholder Economy. My name is Auro Trini Castelli, and I'm Chief Strategy Officer of PDB New York. Today, I have the honor and the privilege to be joined by a group of business and thought leaders that put sustainability at the core of what they do every day. So please join me in welcoming to this virtual stage Deborah Koyama, Global Growth Operations Officer, Unilever. Hello, Deborah. Mauro Porcini, Chief Design Officer, PepsiCo. Great to have you. Ezgi Bercenas, Global Vice President, Head of Sustainability at AD InBev. It's great to have you, Ezgi. And Maher Nasser, Director of the Outreach Division of the UN Department of Global Communications. Welcome, Maher. So the topics that we're going to touch today will focus on the seismic shift from the shareholder economy, which has profit at its core, to the stakeholder economy. And we'll discuss the role that sustainability plays in this shift, and eventually how companies and your companies act in involving, all of the range of the stakeholders that you happen to touch in your everyday business. So from your employees to your partners to the communities you serve, and eventually to all of society in creating positive impact. So I want to start with you, Deborah. In the past few years, you've been working in many different countries, from the US to the UK to Europe. You've covered different roles from marketing to growth to operations. And, you've been working with many different companies. So I think you've seen a lot, right? And I'd love to hear from you about the role that sustainability has had in your business, in these businesses, and over these years, and how it has actually affected the way you do business and eventually elevated the way you do that.
Thank you, Auro. First of all, it's a pleasure to be joining this panel today, and I appreciate the question. I had the opportunity to launch my first sustainability campaign 10 years ago, as you referred to, here in the US. I happen to be in New York today. Back then I was with L'Oreal. And the platform that I launched ended up becoming a multi-year, multi-brand and global initiative for the company. And since then, I have become a champion of sustainability or purpose in the broader sense, including social impact, and have had the opportunity to launch and sponsor teams and initiatives in all these different companies that you again alluded to, and in different geographies, going to Europe, as well as with global scope. And I would say that I have seen a dramatic shift, a dramatic change in the landscape and in terms of the role and impact of sustainability in the world of business, which is where I sit. And again, it's very critical and positive given the challenges that we have today. So I've seen the evolution from being a more limited to having a more limited role in terms of the scope and the reach, driven by a few functions from corporate affairs, for example, with CSR or marketing, communicating to younger audiences. Back then, we were talking to millennials, to where we are today, which you see many more companies now putting sustainability at the center of the organization as part of their visions or strategic pillars, which again is very needed and critical. I joined Unilever 18 months ago, and I couldn't be more aligned with the values of this company. Unilever has been a pioneer in the multi-stakeholder, as you mentioned just now, and has also been leading sustainability in the industry and putting as a purpose more than 10 years ago to make sustainable living a commonplace. And again, I think more recently, I have seen even an acceleration and a bigger shift. I think everybody has seen the 2019 Business Roundtable statement with more than 180 CEOs here in the US committing to lead their companies, putting purpose to all stakeholders at the center of their organizations. So again, dramatic shift, very needed, especially in the context of the pandemic, where climate change, social inequality have been even more accentuated and aggravated. So thank you for the question.
Thank you, Deborah. And you've touched on the role of younger generations. We'll talk about that later. And the Business Roundtable, which was really an epic event. Such a commitment really from the top of the companies, every company. So this is really becoming not just a mandate, but really part of the agenda of everyone's business, which is the only way make it work, because if it doesn't work for the business, it doesn't work for sustainability. So thank you for your thoughts. Mauro, over to you. Of course, you are a design master, right? So all of your ideas go into the product that millions of people actually experience every day. And I wanted to ask you about when you design a product, when you imagine a product, when you create a product, when you actually put that product out there in the world, what is the overall impact that you're trying to make? Are there principles that cut across different products and different categories? And eventually, what is your own definition of positive impact?
Well, first of all, thanks again for the invite. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. Every time we create any kind of product, all the time, any category, any industry, we have a negative impact on the environment, by definition, the very moment we start to produce something. We do it because we try to have a positive impact on the life of people, on our society. So we need to strike the right balance in this equation. I joined a company like PepsiCo, a company of this size, because as a designer, I wanted to have and create a positive impact in the world. And these kind of companies give me the possibility to do it at scale. And from Indra Nooyi in the past, our previous CEO, the idea of performance with purpose, and now Ramon Laguarta, that is doubling down on sustainability, putting it at the center of everything we do. We start with sustainability. Everything is something that is really becoming real. We can really have an impact. For many years, even before joining PepsiCo, I had specific principle that I use in everything I design. I call them the principle of meaningful design. I even wrote about this in a book, in a book that I published, and it's not a book about sustainability. It's a book about innovation, human-driven, for people, for human beings. But sustainability, because of this, is at the center of this. And so what are these principles? Well, first of all, every product, every solution should be sustainable from an environmental and ecological standpoint, obviously. We need to aim to that. But then I use the word sustainable in many other dimensions, in a broader definition. Sustainable from an aesthetic standpoint, so avoiding any kind of visual pollution that we don't need. Sustainable from a functional standpoint, so creating products that are ergonomics, that are user-friendly, that you can use in an easy way. Sustainable from an emotional standpoint, so products and brands that are engaging for people and exciting and drive you in a variety of different ways. Sustainable from an intellectual standpoint, so accessibility, user-friendliness, once again, that is very important when you use any kind of product and service. Sustainable from a social standpoint, respectful, honest, trustworthy. Sustainable from, finally, a financial standpoint, that for a designer is kind of weird. If you talk to the design community, it's like, why are you adding also the financial sustainability to this beautiful principle that you just listed? And the reason is that if we really believe in creating value for the society, if we follow these kind of principles, then we want our products to reach as many people as possible. We need to create an alliance with the business world. We need to commercialize them. We need to distribute them and reach billions of people around the world. And the more value we create for the business, the more we align the ethical value for the society with the business value, the more the business will invest on our good ideas and the more the impact in the society.
Thank you, Mauro. I really love this idea of this extended idea of sustainability. If a product isn't meaningful, it's not sustainable. If it isn't thoughtful, it's not sustainable. If it's not useful, it's not sustainable. And if it's not beautiful, it's not sustainable. It really reminds me probably the very thought that seated at the core of the SDGs. Sustainability used to be long ago closer to the idea of environmentalism, and today with the 17 SDGs, it really opened up to include many more meanings and many more angles that are really comprehensive and make it even more meaningful. Which I think is a perfect transition to you, Maher. You're the voice of the UN. You are the one who's closer to the SDGs and talk about them every day, promotes them every day, and really gave this incredibly thoughtful set of meaning and set of actions and set of intentions through the SDGs. So I wanted to ask you, based on your extensive experience in communicating these issues, the UN issues, the SDGs, how do the SDGs themselves, adopted by the world leaders in late 2015, change your ability to engage with, the wider public, the private sector, companies like, Pepsi, Unilever, InBev, and their businesses eventually?
Well, thank you for the question, and thank you, and great to be with all of you. I think having worked in communications with the United Nations for over 33 years, I saw the difference the Sustainable Development Goals have made. The United Nations was often seen as this building on the east side of New York City, overlooking the East River, which dealt with peace and security issues, with human rights issues, and development. And development was seen as something that we have to do in the South, in countries that are still developing countries. But what we saw is an alignment with the changing perceptions globally, and the realization that the world has reached a point where we needed to really shift gears in moving forward in the way we in our relationship with nature and the way we exploit nature, and also with the rising inequalities among the people of the world. When the UN was created, it was created after the biggest crisis in the 20th century, the Second World War. And it was, of course, created to create peace, but also to create conditions for prosperity on the social, economic levels and human rights for humanity. So that was the 20th century. And the 20th century, and I think we all, if you're looking back, it was all about market demand and supply growth with the purpose of making more money, basically. And I think looking at where the 21st century started, it started with multiple crises. We've had several zoonotic diseases. We've had a financial meltdown. We've had now the COVID pandemic. And what we see is the climate crisis. It's impacting everybody and everything. And I think as the customers of companies started themselves looking at, hey, we're heading in the wrong direction. And I think world leaders realized that, and the United Nations was able, through the process that preceded the adoption of the SDGs, consultations with civil society, with members of the community, within governments, to arrive at these 17 Sustainable Development Goals that more or less provided a charter forward to deal with all the ills that have come to become very apparent, because we live today in a very transparent world. Technology and communication, young people have access to information that in the past you had to go and study in a library for days to find out. Now with a click of a finger on your smartphone, you get the world at your fingertips. So the changed perception among the customers, young people in particular, and the business world, because if you're in the extraction industry, you're also starting to realize that what I'm doing is damaging the planet. What I'm doing is unsustainable, because yes, I'm creating wealth now for myself and my shareholders, but as Deborah pointed out, the Business Roundtable was a landmark change, that the purpose of the corporation is no longer just about wealth creation for the shareholder. It also comes with a responsibility. So we have at the UN, of course, government where leaders adopted the SDGs, but then we keep resisting the notion that they are the United Nations SDGs. My point is always to say they are the people's SDGs. They are everybody's SDGs. The United Nations Charter starts with the words, we the peoples. And I think we the peoples are interested in peace, in prosperity, in dignity, in justice, and equality. And that's what the SDGs are about. But it's not just about the people, it's also about the planet. Because what we have done is we would need 2-3 planets if we continue at the same rate for human race to be able to continue for the next century. So this is why the SDGs took hold and I think became more of a rallying cry, not just for the UN, but for civil society, private sector, and world leaders as a whole. And I think communicating about them, because in this context, became much easier than communicating about anything else we have done in the UN, because there is something in them for everybody.
Thank you, Maher. I really like this idea that the SDGs are, and sustainability itself, is everyone's business, right? And we need to create a community around them Otherwise, we're not going to move forward productively as a community along the agenda. Ezgi, I want to ask you, of course, AB InBev is an amazing advocate of the 17 UN SDGs, but I really love the fact that you have your own agenda within the agenda, and you define sustainable goals that feel really connected to the business you run and to the mission you have. So I wanted to ask you, how did you define them? How did you come up with identifying specific goals, and how did they change the way in which AB InBev has operated since, and the impact on the business?
Yeah, thank you, Ara, for the question, and thanks for having me today. What a fantastic panel. So at AB InBev, we've got operations in over 50 countries around the world. So we'd like to think of ourselves as a global local company. And, we source, make, sell over 90% of our products locally. And that really deeply ties us into the communities where we live and work. It deeply ties us into the natural environments where our products come from, be it raw materials, be it water. So for us, when we started thinking about our next set of public commitments, which is our 2025 sustainability goals, we really wanted to not only bring in that outward in approach and, how we show up in the world, who are our stakeholders, how we create value for all of them, but also at the same time, think about materiality for our business and really say, okay, what is important for business success? What is important for our stakeholders out in the world? And ultimately, this is really about resilience. And that's how we designed it. Our sustainability goals have a number of environmental and social metrics within them. And they range from agricultural development to water security, to circular packaging and how we think about that bottle or can that we put out in the market, even post-consumer, post-consumption. And then, of course, ultimately climate action. And at every touch point along that value chain, we really think about ways how we can improve livelihoods and how we can improve environmental resilience. And of course, our business continuity as well. And I think the way we were able to really move the needle on that front is because sustainability has been housed within our procurement team. It really put us very close to our supply chain, gave us that ability to really influence upstream and downstream in how we think about our business model and how we think about the future, how we work with our glass suppliers on, glass of the future and what does the packaging of the future look like, or how we think about transportation and what does the logistics of the future look like. So really put us closer to our what I would call our supply chain, and gave us that ability to bring that broader scope in how we view our communities and the surrounding ecosystems, and really allowed us to engage with our suppliers at a more strategic, collaborative level than we've ever done before. And out of that, a couple different initiatives came out. One, we created an Eclipse platform where we recruited some of our largest suppliers in to start thinking about co-designing that future and thinking about what is in your innovation pipeline, how do we pilot together, how do we invest in new projects, new thinking together. And then the second piece was, we knew that we couldn't solve all of our ambitions today based on today's partnerships and today's technologies. So we wanted to go and recruit new partners and really find cutting edge innovative solutions out there. And we created a 100+ accelerator program that this year, actually, Unilever also joined that initiative. And, we're out there trying to look for startups that are going to help us change the world and make it a better place, and test pilot solutions and even find ways to scale these solutions where we can identify them. Over the last 2 years, we accelerated 36 startups in 16 countries, and it's been a phenomenal learning. So yeah, for us, this really is about, a design. I love what Mauro said. I really think it is about design. And if you think about it, sustainable development, be it environmental, economic, or social, it is the ultimate brief for design. And that's how we're able to kind of bring that into our thinking, into our decision making, and really create that long-lasting change.
Yeah, I really love this idea of sustainability by design. The fact that you really think about sustainability across the whole cycle, and eventually, at every cycle, it's probably going to get better because you've got learnings from the previous cycle, right? So it is design, but it's also innovation, and when it's systemic in the way you develop it, I think it really gets to not only to a good purpose, but also to a great impact. So thank you for that. Deborah, back to you. So given your role, growth is at the center of what you do. So what do you think is the specific contribution that sustainability has when it comes to growth, right? When it comes to growing a company's business, and eventually, can you give us concrete examples of how you experience growth because of sustainability at Unilever?
Sure. So first, Aro, as I mentioned before, I have seen my own career, in my own experience, that sustainability, or in a broader sense, purpose, including social impact, do deliver growth, business growth. So again, I joined Unilever to bring to life the vision of the organization that it is not only to be a leader in sustainable business, but I want to be part of the team of the journey that proves that purpose-led, future-fit model like ours delivers superior performance. So there's no trade-off, there's no two separate concepts, right? Purpose drives growth. In terms of Unilever, again, purpose is at the heart of the compass of the organization. It is fully integrated in the business strategies. So we have three divisional businesses, right, or categories, if you will. So for food and refreshments, for example, the purpose is to be a force for good. And we have plant-based as a key strategic platform. And you're probably seeing already in the markets several vegan options under iconic global brands like Ben & Jerry's or Hellmann's or Knorr's. Or we have the vision to expand the vegetarian butcher, which is a Dutch company and acquisition to the world. And the purpose is really to become the biggest butcher, a vegetarian one in the world. For home care, the purpose is to create a cleaner future with the objective to eliminate environmental impact of cleaning products. We have a brand called Sif that has refillable products. So that reduced plastic packaging by 75%, water usage in home by 97%, and obviously carbon emissions because you have less trucks given this portfolio. And finally, for the third division, which is beauty and product and personal care, the purpose is to have positive beauty. And I think a very recent example is from our brand called Hourglass. I don't know if people knew, but one red lipstick contains up to 1,000 crushed female insects. So the R&D of Hourglass spent the past 3 years developing an alternative cruelty-free red lipstick. So you have that option as a consumer, which is using zero animal byproduct. And specifically in my role, one of my pillars is to drive strategy into action. So I've been championing and communicating to the whole organization to drive purpose end to end, meaning consumers, shoppers, and customers. We know that customers are also looking at retailers, are also looking for sustainable brands and products. And I've been also being quite involved in innovation and making that much more impactful within Unilever, being aligned to the purpose-led vision strategy that I just spoke about.
Thank you, Deborah. I think it's it is paramount that as companies develop new products and new visions, they actually move from intention to action. And I think what's really interesting, you talked about it, is this idea that it's no longer a compromise. Actually, it is an opportunity to create products that are new and that are intriguing and also, of course, sustainable. And going back to what Mauro was saying before, it really gives the opportunity to think even further about any product you put out there, right? And make it better from whatever angle you're looking at. So I think that that is core. That we look at sustainability as something that improves things all around, rather than something that brings compromises, to the table. So back to you, Asvi. We touched base before on this shift from the shareholder economy to the stakeholder economy. And of course, a company like yours has many stakeholders, has many partners, as you referenced previously. So I would like to get to know more about how do you keep all these different stakeholders, and they all have a different role, of course, in the process. How do you keep them aware, engaged, and activated around your very own agenda?
Yeah, great question. And if you look at the stakeholders out there, it could be consumers, customers, employees. It could be our, the civil community, the civil society, and the local authorities that we work with. And yeah, it's definitely very targeted efforts within the local context. I think that's the biggest thing, and really engaging across our entire value chain. And, again, a global company of our size, we do have up to 6 million small, medium-sized retailers that we work with, the customers that we work with. We have about 70,000 SME suppliers. So, there is those that are out there that have a larger scope and larger partnership with us, and we're continuing to innovate with them. But at the same time, we can't leave behind the smaller retailers, the smaller suppliers. So, our engagement with them is more around how do we make sure their business continuity, how do we provide them with the resources, tools, skills that they need so that they can be, a more efficient farmer, or they can be a better business person. And especially over the pandemic, this was really something that we turn our attention to as especially now as we're gearing up for recovery around the world, really putting ourselves closer to the businesses of our suppliers and retailer partners around the world really allowed us to better understand their concerns, their worries coming out of the pandemic, so that we can provide them with the right, support. And, one example is we left our buying centers open for barley and other crops for our smallholder farmers so that we could ensure their cash flow during the pandemic. And of course, we did that in a safe way and, following all the guidelines, but this was something very important to us. And we didn't want to hold some of that engagement, because again, this is about livelihoods, it's about that value chain resilience, it's about agricultural development or retailer development and entrepreneurship ultimately. And I think, companies like ours really have a big role to play in bringing some of those learnings and insights from markets to markets and really scaling up programs, again, with a customized approach. But, that's one piece, I think, on the upstream and downstream side. And, when it comes to our employees, what we're really seeing is they're increasingly looking for that sense of pride, sense of purpose. And it's really something that we've visibly noticed over the last few years. And whether someone is recruiting for a finance position, a marketing position, a logistics position, or something in procurement or sustainability, everyone is going to ask you, what are you doing in sustainability? How is this business a sustainable business? What are your core values and principles? And increasingly, it's fantastic to see that level of engagement and also accountability, coming from our employees, because they really hold us accountable. They act as owners, and I've got an incredible team of teams, I'd like to call it. My team is very small, but we have many teams across 6-7 different functions that are carrying targets tied to their compensation on sustainability. And every year we get more and more people wanting to be involved in sustainability projects, be it, whether it's their everyday project or something they want to do on the side. They really want to engage and learn and continue to drive this agenda with us. And it's been incredible to really have that support.
Thank you. And I like the fact that you touched on innovation, and with this idea that, innovation should not leave anyone behind. Of course, the more you move ahead, the more, some people tend to be left behind. And of course, that cannot happen with sustainability. So Mauro, talking about innovation, of course, design thinking as innovation at its core. So I really wanted to hear from you, what is your own perspective on how design thinking can push innovation, and what is the intersection between sustainability and innovation in the work you do every day?
Well, once again, design thinking is all about understanding deeply the needs and wants of people, and therefore the needs and wants of the society we live in. I think what is changing now, finally, is that there is more permission to create products that are more sustainable. Not just in our companies. I think, when I joined PepsiCo, already back then, we wanted to make more sustainable products, but it was not so easy to market them. Often, consumers were not ready to certain kind of trade-offs that they needed to take by definition. And this is the challenge that we have as designers, brand people, innovators. We need to make sure that we build experiences that are still meaningful, engaging, exciting for people. So in the moment you start to have some trade-off in functionality, inconvenience because of sustainability, then you need to understand how to fill that gap in other ways. And when I talk about trade-offs, I talk about, for instance, reducing the amount of material you have on a product. The product, by definition, may be a little bit more stable, a little bit flimsy. You need to reuse a product. So think about our word, reusable vessels and bottles. Well, there is the inconvenience of taking that with you. Or you need to refill a reusable bottle. There is the inconvenience of doing that for the consumer. So there are trade-offs. What we're trying to understand is how can you fill that gap? How can you create a different kind of value for people in a variety of different ways? I think a very interesting project that we launched recently, for instance, is this reusable bottle for Gatorade, where we have a system where you have a patch that you put on your skin. They monitor your sweating, the composition of your sweating, and gives an information to an app about the kind of formulation of Gatorade that you need. You have your reusable bottle, you fill it with water, and then you have a pod with your specific formulation. So in this specific case, we are filling the gap of the inconvenience of bringing a bottle with you with the additional value of personalizing the formulation for you. We tell you how many bottles you are saving, and the solution we are saving with this kind of solution compared to ready-to-drink bottle, 60% of plastic, 90% of energy used in production, 80% of space in transportation, 40% of greenhouse gas emissions. These are just examples, but once again, is an ecosystem. There are different stakeholders in this system. The companies need to do something. The consumers need to do something too. What we need to do from an innovation standpoint, from a design standpoint, is to try to build the most exciting, meaningful, relevant experiences for people.
Thank you. And I think there's nothing better to involve people than to make your products, your services more personal, right? Because they're going to feel individually activated, fulfilled, and as you said before, the products will just be more meaningful. And when a product is meaningful, then the product is often sustainable. Maher, back to you. We just spoke about innovation, and we touched based on the younger generations, right? Right before at the beginning of the panel. So with rising awareness about climate change, especially among young people, and we've seen how active they can be, down to teenagers. Teenagers are probably the most active community these days, which is, I find it super fascinating. Once ago they had to think about school and books, and now they think about the planet. That's a massive, massive shift. So how are you able in your everyday mission to leverage this community and their involvement to engage, marketeers, businesses around the world on the SDGs and on sustainability issues?
Well, I think the issue of young people, whether millennials or Gen Z, they're not just the customers that are creating the pressure. They're also the new employees and intake into companies. So to the point that was made by Ezgi and Deborah, I think employees and what they're looking for, they also want to work in a company that they see fulfills their aspirations and aligns with their perception about what needs to be done on climate, on sustainability, on diversity, equity, and inclusion. I mean, all of these things are connected, and they're all about the SDGs. So for us, I think what we try to do is, first of all, make information available to young people so that they know exactly what is out there and how they can actually create the advocacy for the things that they believe are necessary for them to have a better life in the future, or at least equivalent to that of their parents. The younger generation is the generation that is now the current employees of these companies, but also the leadership of these companies are younger than the leadership in the 20th century. Look across the board, you will find younger people now in executive positions in most top 500 companies in the world. And they are people with different perceptions that are aware of what is going around them. They have grown up listening about climate change, seeing the impact that it has around them, but also the impact of rising inequality and the pressures that we are putting on the environment and the Secretary General. I think Antonio Guterres has used the term, it is time for us to stop war on nature. because what is happening is a war on nature. And for the companies that are looking at it's about self-interest. I mean, if the world is going down the drain, it doesn't matter how much profit you generate, because then the ramifications of climate crisis, whether on rising sea levels, more extreme weather conditions, or forcing people to move and therefore creating instability and conflict, that is not a world where a company succeeds. And I think that's the world that we come together. And I think young people are a global force for good, and a global force that the United Nations is providing information for them. We're trying to provide the tools, but also we're giving them platform. So when in September of 2019, Secretary General Antonio Guterres, he invited Greta Thunberg. I mean, you mentioned young people and teenagers taking the lead on climate, to address world leaders in the General Assembly. And that was a brave thing to do, to bring this young 16-year-old who has a mind of her own, very committed, very dedicated, to sit there and tell world leaders from the House of the United Nations, how dare you? I think that was momentous. And I think that was something that the UN is proud to have done. And I think we want to enable the younger generation to take matters into their own hand, because they are the most invested in the future. And if companies fail to see that, then they're actually exercising marketing myopia. The world is changing. And I think the way we do things has to change. If you go back to the original concept of marketing myopia, when railroad companies saw themselves, and they were the biggest companies in the US, as in the railroad business, not in the transport business, they went out of business. And I think it's that concept. Are we in the business of energy, or are we in the business of carbon and fossil fuels? And I think these are the kinds of questions every company needs to ask itself, and see what and how innovation, and I think innovation is key. And I think it starts with design. Innovation and design are the way that we are going to find solutions. Renewable energy, people were saying it's too expensive, we won't be there for another century. But with investment, with innovation, renewable energy today is cheaper than classical fossil fuel-based energy, electricity. Electric cars, they're becoming cheaper. And so therefore, innovation, design, change of thinking, and getting out of the marketing myopia, tunnel vision, I think are important for us. And young people are a driving force in that. And at the UN, I think we're keen to work and provide them with the tools that they need to do that. So therefore, I mean, there are many actions that we have put out, tools for. ACT Now is a website, an app that people can do little things on their own, but not in isolation, with advocacy. Because advocacy and putting companies to join the Net Zero Alliance, which is something new that we launched as a commitment from the private sector, but also from governments, local and national, to reach net zero by 2030, if not even before. And that is something that it's like a snowball. It starts small, it grows. And I think with the Global Compact and the network it has and such events, it's going to have a much, much bigger impact. If you look at the GDP of any country, 85% of that is actually private sector. It's not just the government. So government regulation is important, but turnaround among businesses is as, if not even more important.
Thank you. And I really think that your point of businesses being, forward thinking and having to be forward thinking is core, not only for them to compete. We've seen big businesses going out of business very quickly because of new businesses coming in. So it's not just a business obligation; it is a sustainable obligation, and without it, there's no future for any business. So we have just a few minutes left, and I'd like to address the same question to all of you, kind of a rapid fire mode, going back to the UN and actually going back to the role that the UN Global Compact can play in really encouraging purpose-driven, sustainability-driven marketing and design and innovation across all of your companies, and in general, all of the companies, right? So I'd like to start with you, Ezgi, and hear your thought about what could be done? What could the UN Global Compact do? What you could do with the UN Global Compact on top of being here today, of course, and sharing your ideas to promote this agenda, this collective agenda for all of us.
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic question, and especially, framing it around that forward thinking as well, I think is absolutely correct. And, for us, we know that purpose can be a gateway for sustainable consumption. We know that our consumers are increasingly asking for more information, as Maher mentioned, right? And we're going to be held accountable. And, there are a few big learnings that came out of our engagement. And maybe I can give one quick example. Budweiser brand, everyone knows the iconic Super Bowl commercials that we've always had. In 2019, about a year after Budweiser committed to going 100% renewable electricity, 2019, one of the most memorable Super Bowl commercials that Budweiser put out there, and we've reached millions with, was around renewable electricity, and it was around wind never felt better. Again, communicating to the masses that renewable electricity is possible today, that it is achievable, that we are doing it, that we will continue to do it, we will bring it up, to our suppliers as well. And I think going forward, we need to find more creative and innovative ways to really speak to our consumers. And the role of the UN, in my mind, is most recently the UN launched a CFO task force for the UN SDGs, and our CFO Fernando Tenenbaum sits within that together with his peers, CFOs of nearly another 30 companies. And I think that created such a powerful platform for them to get together, to really speak the language, to create frameworks, to sharpen that forward-looking thinking. And I think this could be a unique opportunity for us to convene marketeers and designers and the commercial people that are really going to approach this topic from a completely different angle, right? And they can create the messages around authenticity. I think we're going to be held accountable for that. I think that local approach is going to be key, but also that simplicity and that gritty optimism. I think that there is a piece around this where, as a sustainability professional, I can go in and I can say, here's all the things that are wrong and we're falling behind and we need to do more. But then, a marketeer or a designer can come in and say, here's the solution. Here's how we can come together. Here's how we can empower our consumers with an everyday choice. So I think there's a big role that UN could play there in maybe changing the narrative or convening sustainability and marketing professionals to tackle the shared problem together for the opportunity. Yeah.
Thank you. Mauro, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, very similar to the one that SG just shared with us. I think, governments, all kind of organizations, different kind of businesses and companies, we are trying to do the right thing. We are trying to move the needle, but by ourselves is difficult. And I think the United Nations can play the role of facilitator, interpreter, amplifier of these efforts, sharing best practices, inspiring each other, pushing each other to do better and better and better, with even a healthy kind of competition amongst different companies and different leaders. And then also somehow building a connection with people, with a society, with consumers and users, because everybody has a role in this. We are not on our own. I see many companies that are doing the right thing, but we need then consumers to buy that thing. We need the media to celebrate what's going on. We can't change things from night to day. We need to arrive there incrementally. What we can do and should do is to accelerate, as much as possible. But if consumers don't embrace what we're doing, we can't accelerate. And this is where, once again, organizations like United Nations can help us building a full ecosystem where everybody has a role. Just together we can change the world as fast as possible.
Thank you, Mauro. So we have 1 minute left. So Deborah, a quick thought from you about the role that the UN Global Compact can play.
Yes, Aldo, very aligned to Esgi and Mauro. I think more and more companies are embracing purpose-driven marketing. I'll wear my marketing hat at this point. I used to drive that as a CMO in my prior role. So again, the more that the UN Global Compact can shed light on the world's challenges, the SDGs, and also showcase business and brands that are trying to tackle some of these challenges, I believe we will inspire more companies to embrace purpose-driven marketing and more consumers to be aware of these business and brands and choose them because they're aligned with their values.
Thank you, Deborah. And finally, back to the UN and back to you, Maher. So, I mean, you are the voice of the UN. You're close to the UN Global Compact each and every day. So, super quick thought about this, massive topic. I know it's difficult to synthesize it in just a few seconds, but I'd love to hear from you.
No, I agree totally with what was said by all the previous speakers on this point, which is we need to give people hope. We need to give solutions, because doom and gloom gets us nowhere. And I think what we often say is the United Nations, we are in the business of hope, because without hope, we will not move forward. And I think we have to show the solutions. And the solutions are there. We have to say that it is possible for us to be able to get to doing what we need to do to create sustainable consumption, sustainable production, societies that care not only for each other, but also for the environment on which we live. And I think the Global Compact can play a role, and which is already it's doing. It was an innovation in itself in the United Nations, because the UN was created as an organization of member states, of governments, who, by the way, are very jealous to cede place to the private sector. So the discussion, and I think looking to the future in 21st century, what we're looking at is the need to be more of a multi-stakeholder approach, an approach that includes the private sector, includes government at all levels, civil society, individuals, to move forward and really offer a path that will get us to a world where everybody thrives in peace, dignity, equity on a healthy planet.
Thank you, Maher. So with hope, we close today's panel. I really want to thank all of you for this engaging, forward-thinking, meaningful conversation. I also want to thank everyone in the audience online joining the discussion. So stay tuned for what's next and enjoy the summit. Thank you.